Arsenal have beaten Tottenham in the North London derby for the second time this season, and in this video we're going to be breaking down how they did it, including a look at the Arsenal tactic that helped them dominate their bitter rivals. Arsenal asserted their dominance early on in the first half, looking to utilise controlled timed aggression high up the pitch to be able to create turnovers to better get themselves towards Tottenham's goal. They tried to do this through preventing Tottenham's build-up from the back, which is something that we know they like to do on a number of occasions. But it was the midfield three that Arsenal really looked to exploit, and they did this through their own midfield partnerships. Odegaard onto Bissouma, Rice onto Sarr, and Partey onto Bergvall. It was through this and through the aggression that these three had which really started to stifle the way that Tottenham wanted to build up play. Forcing them out wide, Sterling and Trossard did a good job of marking Porro and Spence, meaning that if they wanted to go forwards, Tottenham had to play aerially, and it meant that trying to hit Solanke was a little bit more difficult because of the aggression of William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes. Jurrien Timber and Lewis Skelly did a very good job on Kulusevski and Son, and what ended up happening was that the Tottenham rotation just was not there. Movement was being followed by players, and it meant that whether Sarr came over, Rice would do the same, whether Sarr dropped back, Rice would do the same, and the same can be said for a number of Tottenham players with their respective Arsenal counterparts. It was through this aggression that turnovers were able to be created, and due to those turnovers, a lot of Arsenal chances were able to be forged, and it was through this avenue and this tactic that Arsenal really started to gain a dominant hand in the match. And you can see what I'm talking about right here. So here you've got Archie Gray on the ball currently, but take a look at the Arsenal midfield and where they are positioning themselves. Declan Rice is positioning himself next to Sarr. You've got Bergvall, who's trying to move forwards. He's next to Odegaard. And you've got Bissouma, who's being marked by Thomas Partey. Now, regardless of which Arsenal player is marking which Tottenham player, the important thing you need to think is that three Arsenal midfielders are marking three Tottenham midfielders. And automatically, this makes progression for Tottenham that little bit more difficult. It means that they need to find different avenues to be able to build up play. Archie Gray recycles back to the goalkeeper, and that's where the first problem comes in, because it initiates Kai Havertz to start pressing. Because the goalkeeper doesn't want to pass back to Gray because he's moving, and he doesn't necessarily want to go long because of the aggression of Solanke, it leaves him with very little options. He can't play into midfield, he can't really play out wide because of the positioning of Raheem Sterling, and he can't play wide and long on the right hand side because of the positioning of Pedro Porro. It means that he is in a really difficult position. So as he looks to try and play a pass and look for it, he ends up fumbling on the ball. I don't necessarily think it's his fault, but again, look at the positions of these two. You've got Sarr and you've got Bissouma, and what you've got is Odegaard and Declan Rice marking both of these players, essentially cutting off this avenue, meaning that Kinski needs to look elsewhere to try and find a pass, but aside from Archie Gray, there really isn't one. He ends up fumbling on this, like I said previously, and meaning that he needs to try and get rid of it quickly. It's through this that he then tries to force a pass through over to Jed Spence, who is right here just out of picture. But if you notice the position of Raheem Sterling looking to take advantage, what you're missing here is actually Jurrien Timber, who comes in to try and intercept this pass. Now, because the pass has been rushed, it means that Jed Spence isn't able to get on the end of it, and Arsenal create another opportunity and another turnover for themselves. But this is a really good example of how blocking that midfield area and the progression for Spurs really did cause a number of problems. Although Arsenal were dominating the first half through their aggression, through their good press, it was actually Tottenham that managed to get the first goal, and they did it through this corner. So first of all, what we need to notice is that Tottenham take the corner short. Next thing is the positioning of these Arsenal players. Now, defensively, they're actually set up quite well, especially for a corner that's going to get whipped into the box. But one thing to note is that it doesn't get whipped into the box. The next thing to notice is the players on the edge of this area, and the fact that Arsenal don't have a player in this box or in this general vicinity. And it means that if anything were to come out on this side, no player is challenging a Tottenham body, and that becomes quite a problem because as the ball gets whipped in by this player out on the right hand side, it means that if a header gets won, it's more difficult to win that second ball, and that is crucial in this situation. As this gets whipped in, yes, you've got a number of Arsenal players outnumbering those Tottenham bodies. What you've got is Heung-min Son right here. So as Gabriel manages to win that header in pretty brilliant fashion, I might add. I mean, look at that. As he wins it, it comes out to the edge of the box. Now, one really interesting thing is that no one's challenging Heung-min Son here. If someone was going to challenge him, then he probably wouldn't have been able to get this shot off, and it wouldn't have been deflected and gone in the goal. But of course, you can always look at things in hindsight, but I think they needed one extra player just to be able to be on the edge, to just make sure that Son doesn't get this opportunity. It ends up going in the back of the net, and against the run of play, Tottenham go 1-0 up. Arsenal get themselves back into the game with, what else? Another set piece. And it's actually a pretty well executed one, so let's take a look. First of all, we're going to be having a look at our goal scorer. We've got Gabriel right here, and he's being marked by Dragusin. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the position that Declan Rice's cross is going to go into, and that's towards the back post right here. We have Thomas Partey and we have Leandro Trossard occupying this area. Notice where the Tottenham players are. They're within more or less the width of the goal, which is fine. It's where they need to be. They're defending their goal, of course. But what we're going to notice and what we're going to try to make sure that we see is these Arsenal players just moving these Tottenham players up a little bit. And it's going to create a small space at the back post. And that space is going to be taken by, you guessed it, Gabriel Magalhaes. Is going to make that run round towards the back post. It's all pre-orchestrated. Declan Rice knows he's going to whip it towards the back post. The Arsenal players who aren't involved in this know that they need to move these Tottenham players forward. So as the ball gets whipped in, look at this. You've got Thomas Partey. Let's try and have a closer look at this. You've got Thomas Partey. You've got the likes of Saliba. You've got the likes of Jurrien Timber all pushing forwards. And this is all to try and create that little bit of space. You've got Leandro Trossard still there, but just look at this. The space is now free. The space is now open. Gabriel Magalhaes is now on his bike. He's ready to go. He's ready to go into that space. He knows that Declan Rice is going to be able to make that. He knows it's going to go there. So as he does that, he's going to get his head onto that and get it at least back across goal. Just so happens that it hits Dominic Solanke through all of the chaos and goes in. But it's really well worked, it's really well orchestrated, and again, it's another brilliantly done Arsenal set piece. Before we go and take a look at Arsenal's second goal, the goal that won them the match, I want to touch on Arsenal's tactic again. The idea of preventing the progression to the centre of Tottenham's pitch, preventing these base midfielders from being able to get on the ball and progress the ball forwards. That controlled aggression that came from Arsenal's midfield three and the impact that it had on both Bissouma and Sarr. And the impact actually was a really negative one, and it was this that I believe won them the game, especially in the first half. Sarr and Bissouma combined had 2 wins in terms of duels out of 12. That's 2 duels won out of 12. That is incredibly poor. To contrast that, Bergvall actually had 9 out of 15, which is much better. And when you consider he's the youngest statesman of the group, he's only 18 years old, it's not only a shining endorsement of how good Bergvall is, but it showed how much Sarr and Bissouma really struggled, and in turn, Tottenham struggled. To try and combat Arsenal's impressive aggression, Tottenham tried to be aggressive themselves, pushing Porro and Spence into areas that they are comfortable with, but it hurt Tottenham's progression to a certain extent. Splitting both Gray and Dragusin, it meant that while Tottenham had some passes available and Arsenal had more ground to cover, they were happy to do that because they were still preventing this trio from getting on the ball, and that was absolutely key. The aggression shown from Arsenal's right and left backs meant that the wingers weren't able to really get on the ball, and even if they were, the idea of holding this line so high and keeping Tottenham penned in meant that even if Son or Kulusevski got on the ball, they needed to make huge runs to try and get into these channels. And even if they did get into these channels, once they got there, they either didn't have the support because their teammates weren't following them with enough pace and with enough speed, or they were just so tired once they got here or here that they just weren't able to do anything with it, forcing that Arsenal pressure back onto that Tottenham back line. And it happened time after time again until inevitably Tottenham wilted. And the culmination and reward for Arsenal's hard work came here. This is Arsenal's second goal. And let's try to break it down. So, you've got Jed Spence on the ball currently. He's being marked by Raheem Sterling. Look how aggressive Sterling is being. But again, let's take a look at that Tottenham midfield. The midfield that wasn't able to progress the ball forwards. So, you've got over here Sarr, who's being marked by Trossard. You've got Declan Rice on to Lucas Bergvall, and you've got Basuma, who's a little bit free. Thomas Partey is obviously not too far away. Just almost out of picture. I just want you to notice this as well. Look at Miles Lewis-Skelly here onto Kulusevski. Again, it was the entirety of this Arsenal team being really aggressive, really focused, and making sure that they did not let Tottenham play. But as this continues, what we can see is that Jed Spence tries to play a 1-2 with Basuma. Now, two things happen here. Jed Spence makes a movement forwards and Thomas Partey is getting himself ready, because once this pass gets played by Spence, you've got an option. You've got an option to play that pass, but once he doesn't play that pass, he doesn't make that reverse pass into Spence, you've got a problem. Because once he makes that movement and decides not to take it, you've got Odegaard and Partey ready to converge, ready to take that space, ready to take that moment. And it's in that, look at Odegaard, look at Partey, it's in that Partey decides to pounce. And once he pounces and he takes the ball, he turns it over. And the next thing I need to show you is the amount of Tottenham players who are out of position. Look at the position of Pedro Porro. There's no reason for him to be there. Genuinely. You're playing against your huge rivals who are very dangerous, who are being really aggressive against you. There's nothing wrong with being an extra option for your team here. Nothing wrong with it. You have the pace to be able to drive forwards, but instead he takes this position and he leaves Trossard. He doesn't know that he's leaving Trossard, but he leaves Trossard. So as the ball gets turned over here, what you've got is that Odegaard is now going to pounce on it. And now you've all of a sudden got huge danger. Trossard makes a run down the side because he's not being marked by Porro. You've got Rice, who's now left Bergvall to then go and join the attack. And all of a sudden, these Arsenal players come alive. And as they come alive, you've now got an option. Odegaard, with his vision, plays a fantastic pass into this area. And all of a sudden, you've got huge problems. Trossard moves into this area, and it's now about how do you really start to mitigate this attack? How do you start to quell this attack? It's still possible, but one thing that I think Trossard does really well, as we forward this on, I think he utilises the line of the penalty box to take an early shot, almost as a guide of when to hit the ball, because as he reaches the penalty area, he lines himself up for a shot, an early shot which I think catches Kinski off guard somewhat. I think Dragozin could come and contest a little bit earlier, but I'm not necessarily putting that on him. I think the goal was lost a little bit earlier. Trossard takes that shot and shoots across Kinski. Now, could he do better? Probably. Is it a little bit unfortunate for Tottenham? Yes, but it's really well done by Arsenal, and Trossard taking that shot and firing it towards goal at least gets a shot on target, and it means that there's always going to be an opportunity for a rebound, and if there isn't, you've still taken that moment. He takes that moment and he gets rewarded for his good effort, for Arsenal's good effort, and for their aggression and their fantastic game plan and tactic. And it was a really well worked goal and a brilliantly played game by Arsenal. They thoroughly deserved the victory because I think they dominated Tottenham, especially in that first half. But of course, guys, I want you to let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.